Summary of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. An unnamed narrator tells reader that he is an invisible man. The narrator says that he can't be seen because other people don't want to. He goes on to say that he lives underground and gets power from Monopolated Light and Power Company by lining his room with light bulbs. The narrator listens to jazz and talks about a dream he had while listening to Louis Armstrong. In this dream, he traveled back in time to the time of slavery. The storyteller has a flashback to his own youth and thinks about how naive he was back then. The storyteller is a bright young man who has been asked to speak at his high school graduation in front of a group of important white leaders from the area. At the meeting, the narrator is asked to join some other black students in an embarrassing boxing match called a battle royal. The boys then have to grab for their money on an electric mat. The storyteller then gives his speech while still swallowing blood. The local leaders give the narrator a briefcase and a grant to the black college in the state as a prize. Later, the storyteller is a student at the black college that hasn't been named. One of the school's sponsors, a northern white man called Mr. Norton, has asked the narrator to drive him around. The narrator drives Mr. Norton to a place near the school that neither of them know. Mr. Norton tells the narrator to stop the car, and Mr. Norton gets out to talk to a neighborhood sharecropper named Jim Trueblood. Trueblood has made himself look bad by getting his daughter pregnant, and he tells Mr. Norton about it in a long, strange story. Mr. Norton is both scared and excited by what he sees, and he tells the reporter that he needs a stimulant to get back to normal. The narrator takes Mr. Norton to the Golden Day, a black bar and whorehouse, because he is afraid that Mr. Norton will get sick. When they get there, they find a group of mentally ill people in the Golden Day. The narrator tries to take a drink outside but ends up having to bring Mr. Norton into the bar, where chaos ensues. A former doctor is a patient of the storyteller. The ex-doctor helps Mr. Norton get better after he passed out, but he insults Mr. Norton by being so bold. Mr. Norton goes back to school and talks to Dr. Bledsoe, who is the head of the black college, because he is scared. Dr. Bledsoe is mad at the person telling the story. In chapel, the narrator hears the Reverend Barbie give a lecture in which he hails the black college's founder. The speech makes the speaker feel even worse about what he did wrong. After that, Dr. Bledsoe tells the narrator he did something wrong and decides to send him to New York City. The storyteller will work all summer in New York to pay for his next year's fees. The narrator is told by Dr. Bledsoe that he will write letters of praise for him. The next day, the storyteller goes to New York. The narrator runs into the ex-doctor again on the bus to New York. The ex-doctor gives the narrator some advice that the narrator doesn't understand. The storyteller moves to New York, happy to live in Harlem's black neighborhood. But his search for a job doesn't work out because Dr. Bledsoe's letters don't help much. The narrator finally meets young Emerson, who is the son of the Mr. Emerson he was meant to meet. Emerson, when he was young, let the narrator read Dr. Bledsoe's letter. The narrator finds out that the letter wasn't meant to help him at all, but to give him false hope. The narrator goes away sad, but young Emerson tells him that he might be able to get a job at the Liberty Paints plant. The narrator shows up at Liberty Paints and gets a job helping Lucius Brockway, an old black man who runs the boiler room and basement of the plant. Lucius doesn't trust his student, and when the narrator accidentally walks into a union meeting, Brockway strikes him because he thinks the narrator is working with the union. The narrator wins a fight against the old Brockway, but Brockway gets the last laugh by setting off an explosion in the basement that badly hurts the narrator. The narrator is taken to the plant hospital, where he is strapped into a glass and metal box. The doctors at the factor give the narrator painful electric shocks, and the narrator forgets his own name soon after. The only thing that makes the narrator feel like himself again is his anger at the doctor's racist actions. The storyteller is let out of the hospital and fired from his job at the factory without being told why. When the narrator goes back to Harlem, he is so weak that he almost falls over. The narrator is taken in by a kind woman called Mary Rambo, and the narrator soon rents a place in her house. The storyteller starts to work on his speaking skills. One day, the reporter runs into an old black couple being kicked out of their apartment. The storyteller uses his skills as a speaker to stir up the crowd watching the eviction, which causes a disturbance in public. After the narrator gets away from the cops, a guy named Brother Jack starts to follow him. Brother Jack tells the narrator that he would like to hire him to give talks for the Brotherhood, which is the group he works for. At first, the narrator is suspicious and says no, but later, he decides to take him up on his offer. The narrator is taken to the Brotherhood's offices, where he is given a new name and told he must move away from Mary. The storyteller agrees to the rules. Soon after that, the storyteller gives an inspiring speech in front of a large crowd. He is seen as a hero, but some leaders of the Brotherhood don't agree with what he said. The narrator is sent to a man named Brother Hambro to be indoctrinated in the Brotherhood's ideas. 4 months later, the narrator meets Brother Jack, who tells him that he will be the Harlem district's top spokesman. The narrator's job in Harlem is to get more people to join the Brotherhood. He meets Todd Clifton, a Brotherhood member who is smart and skilled. Ras the Exhorter is a black nationalist who thinks blacks shouldn't work with whites. Clifton and the reporter soon find themselves in a fight with him. The storyteller starts to get known as a speaker pretty quickly. But then things went wrong. The narrator gets a note from someone who doesn't know him telling him that he is growing too fast. Worse yet, another Brotherhood member called Restrum says that the storyteller is using the Brotherhood to help himself. The committee of the Brotherhood kicks the narrator out of the group until the charges against him are cleared. They then give him a talk downtown on the woman question. The narrator meets a woman downtown who talks him into going back to her apartment. They sleep together, and the person telling the story starts to worry that the tryst will be found out. The committee calls the narrator to an emergency meeting and tells him that Todd Clifton has gone missing. The storyteller is sent to Harlem. When he comes back, he finds that things have changed and that the Brotherhood isn't as famous as it used to be. Soon after, the reporter runs into Clifton on the street, where he is selling Sambo dolls. Before the narrator can figure out what Clifton did wrong, a police officer shoots and kills him for fighting arrest. The storyteller plans a public funeral for Clifton because he or she can't get in touch with the party leaders. The funeral goes well, and the narrator's speech gets the people of Harlem excited. But the narrator is called back to the party committee, where he is reprimanded for not doing what they told him to do. Brother Jack's glass eye pops out of its hole when the storyteller talks to him. As the storyteller leaves the committee, Ras the Exhorter's men almost beat him up. The narrator gets a pair of dark-lensed glasses because he can tell that he is no longer famous in Harlem. As soon as the narrator puts on the glasses, a few people think he is a man named Reinhardt, who they say is a gambler, pimp, and preacher. The storyteller goes to Brother Hambro to find out what the Brotherhood's rules are. Hambro tells the narrator that Harlem must be sacrificed for the Brotherhood as a whole, which the narrator finds to be a very unsatisfactory answer. The narrator is disappointed by what Hambro says, so he thinks back to his grandfather's advice to weaken white power by working together. The narrator wants to stop the Brotherhood from working by telling the committee whatever it wants to hear, even if it's not true. He also wants to get into the top of the Brotherhood by sleeping with the wife of a high-ranking member. At a Brotherhood party, the reporter meets Sybil, a woman who fits the bill. But Sybil doesn't know anything. Instead, she uses the narrator to live out her dream of being raped by a black guy. The narrator gets a call that there is a fight in Harlem while Sybil is in his flat. The reporter runs upstairs quickly and finds that Harlem is a mess. The person telling the story ends up with a group of thieves. Soon, the thieves become more violent and burn down their own apartment building as a protest against the bad living conditions. Ras the Exhorter, now dressed as an Abyssinian leader, meets the reporter again. Ras sends his men after the storyteller to try to hang him. The narrator barely gets away from Ras's men before running into 3 white men who want to know what's in his bag. When the storyteller turns to run, he trips over a drain and falls in. The white men lock the narrator underground and make him burn his old things so he can see in the dark. When the storyteller comes back to the present, he says that he has stayed underground since then. The narrator thinks about past and what his grandfather said, and he says his mind won't let him sleep. Last, the storyteller says he is ready to stop hibernating and come out of the ground.
About the author. Ralph Waldo Ellison was born in 1913.
His father ran a small business and died when Ralph was only 3 years old.
His mother brought him up in Oklahoma City.
Ellison was interested in jazz when he was young, and he quickly learned to play the trumpet.
Ellison went to college at the Tuskegee Institute.
At first, he wanted to be a musician. Ellison went to New York to meet other artists and writers and make friends so he could pay for college.
Ellison started writing and publishing stories and reviews when he moved to New York.
During the Great Depression, he joined the Federal Writers Project and the Communist Party.
Ellison was in the Merchant Marines during World War II.
After the war was over, Ellison started writing Invisible Man.
He finished the book in 1952.
The book became a classic right away, which brought Ellison national and world fame. After that, he gave talks at colleges in both Europe and the United States.
He died in 1994.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.